Welcome to the Straight Red Card, and today Brett and I are going to take on the whole re-entry draft process and other things going on as we kind of await for Draft 1, Draft 2 to occur. One thing that just strikes me right away when you look at the re-entry list, Brett, there are some teams that are just basically, it's like a dump-a-thon, you know. Chivas USA, I mean, they had...
DC United.
Yeah, DC United. What a dump-a-thon there.
Still Chivas.
Yeah, well...
San Jose did quite a bit, too.
Yeah, DC was pretty open about why they were doing it. I mean, they're basically cleaning house, essentially, and they're going to start over again. Whitecaps, they did a dump-a-thon, too.
They did, yeah.
6 players there. So some teams just saying, hey, enough's enough, and for good reason if you're Chivas USA.
You look at some of the players on their list, and you're saying, you know what? It's not going to make that much of a difference. They'll be picking some people up during the upcoming draft, and you know what? It's not an overall drop in quality.
Right.
It really isn't.
And some of these guys are getting up there. I mean, Simon Elliott, I mean, he's a New Zealander, and I like New Zealanders, but the guy is, you know, he's old. And maybe he still has something to offer. I watched a few games this season where he played. Not too bad, but you can't really complain about any of the people, although some people were, I don't know why, they were surprised that Zach Thornton was let go. But, you know, maybe Zach Thornton still has some years left in him. But they
It wasn't too long ago that he was doing really well with Chivas.
Yeah. Well, you know, the one thing about Zach Thornton over the years, unfortunately, he hasn't really stayed in shape. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of obvious if you just kind of look at the transformation of his body over the last decade. And it's okay to put on muscle, but there's more than muscle going on there. So basically, they re-signed Ante Jazic, which, I don't know, that's not really a big surprise. And as we go down the list here of folks who, you know, were let go, let's say, by DC United, a lot of people were surprised that, and Santino Quaranta was apparently pretty surprised as well when he got a call from Olsen, and basically Olsen said, we're not going to re-sign you, bud. Sorry. But, I mean, you look at, I mean, people thought really highly a couple years ago of Clyde Simms. And it doesn't look like they're going to, you know, they obviously are going to let him go into Draft 1, Draft 2. So, I don't know. Are you surprised by any of that?
There are a number of players on this list that I would imagine if the teams actually had free reign as far as negotiating contracts, would get re-signed. I mean, if anything, if the price is right, you're looking at at least some decent experienced depth, which is something that we overall lack here in MLS. Mm-hmm. But the problem is a lot of these players are getting up there in age, and they require a higher salary. And I just think that teams are looking at it saying, you know what, for that much money, we can do better.
Well, what about Simms and Quaranta, though? I mean, because Clyde Simms, it wasn't too long ago, people were saying, well, this guy needs a shot on the U.S. national team. Yeah. But, you know, to me, he was just one of those players that never, I mean, what, is he a left back? Or is he a back? Is he a defensive center midfielder? What is Clyde Simms? And he's just one of those players you just never really could figure out where exactly he fit in. He didn't have the balls, you know, the nastiness to be a CDM. And then at left back, you know, I don't know. He's not even that old.
His versatility, I see him more as a defensive mid, which is what he's played a lot of, more of a central midfielder that's played more defensive roles. However, I see him very similar to a Pause. You know, he plays in the center of the field, but he's capable of playing other positions. He's able to fill in roles, and I mean, he's one of those players. I think if obviously after the first round, I think some teams might look into possibly picking him up if the price is right.
Right, and didn't Quaranta actually withdrew? Right, I mean, he has 11 years experience in the league.
I don't really understand what the whole withdrawal before the draft means. Whether or not that's a strategic thing that allows him just to jump out of the draft and basically become a free agent overall, I have no idea.
It's different for each player, right? Because as we went over it earlier, if you're 30 years old and you have so many years of experience in the MLS, then the teams that sign you in draft one have to sign you at 105%.
At the first round, yes.
Right. And I think a lot of the players looked at that and went, I have better chances, first of all, I have no chance of getting signed in draft one and draft two anyhow, so let's just pull out now. And that's for some of the older players who, there's not many options for them outside. I mean, a guy like Joe Cannon, it's hard to say why. Is it because he doesn't think folks are going to pay him 105%, or does he just want to go out there and shop himself? So,
not Joe. I would imagine that would be the case with Joe. I look at this list and I really do not see a single player. Of course, teams will probably prove me wrong, but I don't see a single player that'll go in the first round. Yeah. I think basically every team is going to wait until they can renegotiate the contracts.
So you don't think anybody's going to be picked in this draft one, draft two process?
I see players who can bring some quality to the table. Mm-hmm. Some players who might not take much salary caps. Players like a Peter Lowry, or a Dason Robinson for that matter, who are experienced players and oddly enough both Chicago players. But they're players that won't take that much cap, and it's possible that players like that might get picked up in the first round. I just don't see it happening. I see that a lot of teams. I mean, again, there might be a couple teams that might pick up a player or two.
Right.
But I think most of these players, if they get re-signed, it's going to happen in the second round when teams have the right to renegotiate the contract. And I think that's the real main reason why a lot of these players were dropped is because teams don't value them as highly as they're getting paid. And which is odd to say because they're not really getting paid all that much in comparison to the rest of the world. But in MLS, they are. But
apparently, some of these guys were already re-signed, so they're off the list. So, I mean, the Bobby Boswells are gone.
Convey got traded.
The Conveys are gone. So there have been some players. The Alexanders are gone, signed by San Jose. So the guys that I think a lot of teams think can still contribute a lot. They're getting snatched up now. How many more of them? I mean, some guys to me are surprising that they're still on here. I thought. Maybe I'm off here, but I thought Jacob Peterson for San Jose was a really fine player. And then there are some guys on here you're like, yeah, I can understand why they're on here. Nate Jaqua, Pat Noonan is so old at this point, I don't think he can really contribute much to another team.
Has he contributed anything recently?
No, and there are players on here who retired. Taylor Graham from Seattle, Terry Boss. I mean, it's some of these guys, it was time to go. And I think there are only a few surprises on here for me, and I think the biggest one for me was that Santino Quaranta was not re-signed by DC United prior. And then, again, going back to non-surprises, Adam Chrisman withdrawing from this, not surprising at all. So I don't have too much more to add.
I would imagine with the Quaranta that it's strictly salary cap. I'm not sure what he was like as a player or as a person.
I think he was making $120K. I think somewhere around there. And I may be confusing him with somebody else, but I'm pretty sure that's around what he made.
That's very possible. And quite frankly, they might DC and Olsen just might not value him that much.
Well, yeah, and I think there's this whole breath of fresh air going on here for DC United. They want to almost start from scratch. They want to rebuild this team, and in many ways, they want to kind of do it with an eye towards the future. And I think that's what a lot of teams are looking at, because when we look at some of the things that teams like Portland are doing, as you mentioned earlier, they just signed a 20-year-old kid from Colombia. 19-year-old
Colombian striker.
Who's a U20 player for Colombia as their DP that you mentioned before. That's
Jose Adolfo Valencia.
Yeah, that's not going to hurt him, though.
And Portland's exploiting the new designated player rule, where in 2012, if a player is 20 years of age or younger, they only count towards $150,000 of the salary cap.
Yes. Yeah, so that doesn't hurt him too bad.
No, they can take a chance, and I think that's what MLS was really enforcing with this, is that we would like to see more younger talent, very high prospects come up through the system rather than going out and strictly picking the bigger names from Europe. And we talked about this in our last show with Del Piero.
Right. Oh, yeah, on the opposite side of the spectrum, signing
Complete opposite as far as soccer is concerned.
Signing the aged, yeah. And we'll get into that in a second. But what did you think about Shallery Joseph signing as a re-upping with the Revs as a DP? I was a little surprised at this point they would do that, although I think they kind of owe it to him for all the years of service that he's done at more of a discount price.
No, I don't see anything wrong with this. I mean, in all honesty, he's put in his time, his effort. He's still a high-quality player for the team and the league. I think he deserves to get paid for it. I
mean, it's almost, besides Reese, I mean, at times, maybe there are, like Benny Philhopper, that was a decent addition. But, I mean, he's really been the standout player for that particular franchise for a long time. So
you can call him the franchise player because he really is.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't. I mean, it just depends on how many years you think Shallery Joseph has left in him at that high, level of play.
And so he ends his career on a high note.
Yeah, so if you think he has a couple more years, then I guess it makes sense. And I guess if you're a Revs fan, then you just say, please God, go out and get a few other players. So Shallery can actually, I mean, the poor guy's been practically a one-man team.
Had a rough couple years.
Yeah, it's been bad.